Well, I just think that, we've been without a congressman for far too long, and there's been situations, we have job losses. We have the situation with the Illinois Veterans Home, and it's the job of the congressman to make sure that there's proper resources there, especially with the Veterans Home and the Legionnaires' disease outbreak. And so, I just want to indicate or tell the people that if I were there, we would get to the bottom of some of those questions.
How detrimental has it been, in your opinion, excuse me, that we've been without representation since March?
Well, we haven't had, the offices have been open for a few hours and so forth, so we don't even have constituent services. So if there's a veteran that has an issue, if there's someone whose Medicare hasn't been paid or Social Security hasn't been paid, and those affect people's lives. And so those offices being open for just an hour or so and no actual representation behind it, it's those individual situations that you don't really see and they're not in the papers. Of course, we see the Legionnaire's disease breakout and the impact that that can have without representation, but the individual concerns are not being heard either, and those mount up over time.
And that could be any...
That could be any situation where somebody is, needs a passport or something. I mean, there's all kinds of individual issues that need to be addressed, and if there aren't proper constituent services, that's not happening.
Why do you want this position?
I think people are upset with the dysfunction in Congress, and I am myself. I'm an average guy. I grew up here in Quincy, and I lived most of my life here, and people are upset with the obstruction, the way they can't work together, and so there needs to be fundamental change. And what I am, and what I'm different than Mr. LaHood and others, I'm not an establishment politician. I haven't spent all of my time raising money, and I think that's the clear distinction.
Some people would say, going to the fact that you're not a politician, some would say, well, then what experience would you bring to the table?
Well, I have all kinds of experience. I have all kinds of military experience. I have almost 20 years of leadership experience, and really that's what this is about. It's about leadership. It's not about being or having experience as a politician, because that type of a experience the average person is turned off by. What type of experience is that? How do you run a fundraiser? Those things just detract from what's really important, from the constituent services, which have been sorely lacking. Even before Congressman Schock had to resign, those services were lacking. Now, of course, they're non-existent.
Sure. When people go into the voting booth a week from today, even though I think this is going to air next week, so in a couple days, when they see your name on the ballot, what do you want them to remember when they vote?
I want them to know that when I approach this job, I don't have any of the strings and attachments. So while I haven't raised almost $2 million like Mr. LaHood, every single one of those donations come with some sort of a string. And, he cannot be in a position of objectivity at that point. He has to concern himself by, if I make this vote, what is the establishment going to say? Or what is this interest group going to say? I am unfettered. I don't have any strings attached to me in any way. And so when they go into the voting booth, they know that I can be completely objective, where most politicians today, because of the structure itself, really can't.
How well do you play with others? Meaning like across party lines and such?
Well, for me, I think that I would be in a very good position, because I'm not establishment on either side. So I'm not an establishment Democratic candidate by any way, shape, or form. And you could see that because the DCCC hasn't backed me. Other major political leaders from the Democratic Party haven't come out and backed me, and it's because I'm not establishment. And so that gives me an opportunity to listen to the other side objectively. I'm not tied to, like I said, the establishment, so I can make an objective decision. As an Army officer, my job is just to accomplish the mission. So I'm going to gather as many facts as I possibly can. I don't have any strings. I'm not ideologically swayed so, completely in one direction. So I can take the best course of action for the people. And I think that's what's missing. And I think that's what people want.
How do you go, because this is your third run for Congress?
Kind of. I mean, the first time wasn't even a primary run. That was where Lane Evans had won the primary, and then because of his Parkinson's decided to step down, and so it was a nominating process just for the party. So that wasn't like a traditional campaign. Okay. So it wasn't a vote by the people. So this is really my second time.
Okay. How do you go, because the 18th district, and I think you will agree, is a pretty conservative district.
Sure. Drawn that way.
Well, and
right.
That's a good point. Right. How do you stand out as a Democrat in such a conservative district?
Well, I'm really independent-minded, and I think the people who've got an opportunity to hear me speak can see that, and that's what's lacking. And so while, because of the party structure, obviously you have to, it's a two-party system. Just to give you an example, If I were to run as an independent, I would have needed like 10,000 signatures. That's within a week. In this case, in this special election, it wasn't possible. And so, you know, the party structure is in place, but like I said, I'm very open-minded. I'm very independent, and if it's a Republican idea, I'll support that if I think it'll work. If it's a Democratic idea, I'll support that as well. Now, I think the average person in Illinois is a common sense type of person. And so while a lean, based on our voting records in the last, say, decade or so, in a conservative direction, you know, my message, I think, would resonate with them. It has, and I just hope they get out to vote.
And that's the other thing, with a special election like this, voter turnout expected to be low. What have you done to get people out to get to the voting booth?
Well, we have plans to try to target individual people who have been, you know, enthused about what we're trying to do and my message. And so we're trying to get those people to get 10 more people, and that's kind of the way that we're going to function. Now, we've been really strategic on how we like use our resources because they're so small, but we've been really strategic to get the most out of those resources. I think people have seen signs around town. You know, that's just an example of we're getting out, we're trying to do the things to get my name recognition out there. I know it's a challenge, but I think people are just turned off by the system, and I don't blame them, actually. They don't think their vote matters. They think that these millions of dollars, I mean, Mr. LaHood raised $250,000 in 3 days when he announced. He's got almost $2 million now. He has continued to fundraise, even though I've raised like $12,000, and in a district that's completely drawn in his favor. People should see what this is actually, what the root of this is, which is this is designed for these political establishment politicians to raise money. He doesn't need $2 million to win in this district. I mean, we could have, because of the way the district is drawn, he could conceivably raise no money or raise the same amount I had, and he should still win easily because the district is drawn in his favor. But that's not how the system works. Out of the 435 districts, there's probably about 20 or 25 that are really drawn fairly out of 435. So what they do is they create these politically safe districts. They take a gentleman like Mr. LaHood with a name recognition, they put him in there, and then it becomes like a money-making scheme. That's what happened with Aaron Schock. Aaron Schock had millions of dollars by the time he had to step down. He didn't need all of that money to win. People need to look at that. You know, if you see big ads, you get something in the mail, you know, those things cost money.
Right.
If I would get those things in the mail, and this is what I would tell the voter, where did that money come from? Don't vote for that person. They're too tied to the establishment. They are not concerned with the average, you know, concerns of the people in the district.
Have you been able to campaign quite a bit this summer in Springfield and Peoria?
Yes, I mean, I've been all over.
Okay.
Last night I was in Springfield as well. You know, it's seemingly every night. Now that I'm back in school, it's a challenge, but I use the time that I have to get out. But during the summer, I was in multiple locations almost every single day. So,
anything else you want to add? I didn't ask anything you wanted to talk about or thought we should talk about that I failed to bring up?
Well, I know that people have different concerns. You know, they come from, you know, their family concerns are different and so forth. And it might be, you know, military affairs that concerns them because they have a son or daughter in the military. Or it might be, you know, they work on the river, so it's the intermodal system and the lock and dam system. They all come with different concerns. That's just the way it works. But if we don't change the way politics functions in general, where it's so tied to this perpetual campaign and perpetual fundraising, they're never going to get to those concerns. We're always going to be in this situation where the Congress is functioning, you know, dysfunctional and built on obstruction, and that is not what the district needs. That's not what the country needs.
What are your thoughts on term limits for congressmen?
You know, and I would say I'm not opposed to that in any way. I just think that if you change the fundamental nature of the way the elections work, you drew the districts fairly, so you didn't have gerrymandered districts like we have the 18th. You took some of the money out of politics. I know it takes a little money to get your name out, but in a few months you don't need $2 million. And if you do that, that would solve a lot of the problems. You wouldn't have individuals who would be in positions for 20, 30 years. The term limit issue wouldn't even be an issue. You know, it wouldn't even be at that point wouldn't be a concern because these elections would be fair. And if that were the case, then an average person might have an opportunity to actually run and win.